Hey, welcome back to Engine Shop Joe. Today we're going to do a blast from the past. I wanted to talk about NTC 855 blocks. Small cam for sure. I don't think this related to the big cams, but small cams for sure. There used to be different levels of what they called block hardness. Now, it wasn't the entire block. What it amounted to was how deep they induction hardened the deck of the block where the head gaskets sat. Because if that wasn't hardened, then it would crack. So they used to make a 1, 2, 3, and 4 block. And number one didn't have very much induction hardening to it. It was a shallow depth, I should say. And then number four was the deepest that they induction hardened. So the reason that was important was you could not build a number one block to more than 250 horse. And the picture that you're going to see in a moment is actually an NH250, non-turbocharged, 250 horse out of an old crane. It may never be used. The engine's rebuilt, but the machines that fit are no longer in the fleet. So this engine may just sit. But this is a number one. You'll see that in the picture. So it could only be built at 250. And number two could be built, as I remember, to 300 horse, a number 3 to 350, and a number 4 to 400. So back in the days of the small cam, the highest horsepower you could build a small cam to was 420, NTA 420. But most of the engines were NT 335s and NT 380s. Those were the quote unquote big horses of the day. And all those blocks, anything over 350 horse would be a number four. And the number four would be ground off the block, and that's how you knew. Eventually that pad disappeared. They no longer cast it in, and at that point, all the blocks were number four hardness. So let's take a look here. So here you go. Here's the side of the block. You can see the rectangular pad, and if you look, number one is ground off. And this is our NH250 that we'll probably have forever. When I worked at Cummins up in the early 80s, a fella came in and he had his engine rebuilt by his friend, and they had updated it from naturally aspirated 250 to a NT 335 with a turbo. And the reason he stopped in is because he had antifreeze running out of all of his head gaskets, and he wanted to get the head gaskets replaced. And I remember I pulled the heads off, and at the time I did not know about this numbering sequence. And I pulled the heads off, and the top of the block was nothing but spiderweb cracks coming out of the edges of where the liners went into the counter bores, cracks of the water holes. And I went and got an older guy that worked there, and I said, "Come here and look at this block." And he came over and looked at it, and he says, "Come with me." And I used to tear down from the driver's side. So this was a cab over, and he walked me around the other side, and he looked at the pad, and he goes, "Look." And there was a number one ground off on the block. And they had built it to a 335, so it needed to be at least a number three. And so the poor guy ended up, we just put his old head gaskets back on with new water grommets, and he left because he needed a block. And so anyway, that was my story about the old days with the numbering. And you could build up to an NTA 420 if you had a number four block. Thanks for joining me on Engine Shop Joe. See you next time.